My name is William Winnett, and I produced the documentary Knoxville's Forgotten Champion, the story of Big John Tate. Over the period of about 4.5 months, I wrote, researched, shot, edited, interviewed people for the piece, which was a pretty strenuous and daunting task. And I'd like to take you sort of behind the scenes of how this entire piece came together.
So I've pretty much been a boxing fan my entire life. I remember Rocky III coming on television and me dancing around the living room to Eye of the Tiger. At a yard sale one day when I was about 7, my mother bought me a biography on Muhammad Ali. And from there, it was just off to the races. I've been aware of John Tate since I was a child. My mother told me stories about the heavyweight champion from Knoxville. I got to meet Ace Miller at a young age, John Tate's coach. Ever since I've gotten to Channel 10 for the most part, I've really wanted to tell his story. But with news, you have a time limit on the stories that you tell. And I knew that to tell John Tate's story, I would need more than 90 seconds to tell that story. One day, I was in a bit of a rut and I needed to have a project to really sink my teeth into. And that project was the story of Big John Tate. I basically walked into Golden Gloves one evening and asked to speak to Ace Miller's daughter, Tracy. She was not there at the time, but I was able to get her on the phone and told her that I wanted to tell the story of John Tate. I wanted to do his story justice. Knoxville is a city that puts its sports heroes on a pedestal, and here was a man who had won arguably the greatest prize in sports, the heavyweight championship of the world. You could ask 100 people here in Knoxville, and I feel like 95 of them would have no idea who Big John Tate was. So after speaking to Tracy, she heard the passion in my voice and she granted me access to Golden Gloves gym. And anything I needed, she was there for throughout the entire process of putting this documentary together. Here at WBIR, we had some archive footage of Big John Tate, but not a lot. So a lot of the B-roll for the documentary was shot using memorabilia that I bought off eBay. Me and my partner on this project were essentially locked inside of Golden Gloves gym for 6 hours one day, just shooting B-roll of the memorabilia for the documentary. Normally in these documentaries, you just throw up footage of the fight and that'll be it. But I wanted to do something different for this piece. I didn't want this documentary to be like every other documentary. I wanted it to stand out. So I decided to project John Tate's fight footage onto various boxing-related items around the gym. Whether it be a ring post, whether it be a boxing glove, which again led to an entirely new 6-hour stretch of being locked in Golden Gloves gym, filming these projected sequences. We tried projecting onto the canvas of the boxing ring. We tried projecting onto the heavy bag, but we realized quite early, thankfully, and after a bit of trial and error, that projections would only work on something that was white. So we spent quite a bit of time looking for white objects to project on. I began researching the story of Big John Tate at the Beck Cultural Center, which is a great resource for Black history in Knoxville. And as luck would have it, Mr. Robert Booker had kept a scrapbook of all the newspaper clippings John Tate had been in during his heyday and afterwards here in Knoxville. And that resource proved invaluable. It saved me time going through stacks and stacks of newspapers. I remember opening it up and then I took a picture of every single article that was in Mr. Booker's scrapbook. All right, it's just me and you. We're just gonna have a conversation.
Okay, let's go for it. Let's go.
The next step after I had gathered all my information was to gather interviews with people that were involved. So again, I spoke with Tracy, Ace Miller's daughter, and she put me in contact with Judge Hill, who was John Tate's cornerman. Renee Kessler at the Beck put me in touch with Tate Strickland, who was tied very closely to John Tate back in his heyday. She also put me in touch with Bill Counds, who is the owner of Jewelry Television here in Knoxville, my old boss. I used to work there. And turns out he's a huge boxing fan, former amateur boxer, and his collection and wealth of knowledge about John Tate also proved invaluable to the project. When I went to interview Bill Counds, William Counds, I had just lost an auction on eBay for a John Tate versus Mike Weaver program. And I told him, you probably outbid me on this because I had a bid in on it a couple weeks ago. And he pulls out this huge stack of memorabilia and he just goes, you know what, William, you can have this for your project. And Mr. Counds donated a John Tate versus Mike Weaver and a John Tate versus Harry Coetzee fight programs. I had this old ring boxing magazine that covered the death of Big John Tate. And in this magazine, they interviewed a man by the name of Kerry Farr,
quiet on set,
who was out of Smyrna, Tennessee at the time. And a quick Google search of Kerry Farr near Nashville pulled up his phone number, and I was able to give him a call and go to Nashville and interview him about his time with John Tate. When I was interviewing Tank Strickland, halfway through the interview, his power goes out. So his oxygen machine turns off. So I end up scrambling with him, trying to turn it back on and find the generator and the backup power and try to fix it. It was a funny story. On a more serious note, John Tate is buried in West Memphis, Arkansas. That's where he was born. That's where he grew up. We have a sister station down there who I asked to go film footage of his grave because I was unable to make it 6 hours away to West Memphis, Arkansas. And upon receiving the footage back, I noticed that all the graves around John's had at least flowers decorating the graves. And John Tate's grave had nothing. And here's a man who again rose to the highest of highs in the sports world and still not getting the recognition that at least I felt he deserved. Upon seeing this footage, I had the idea that in the vein of Rocky IV, where Rocky places his heavyweight championship on Apollo Creed's grave, I wanted to do the same thing to Big John Tate. I went online and purchased a replica World Boxing Association heavyweight championship belt. I had a shoot in Henning, Tennessee, which is about an hour north of Memphis. And I decided that during that trip, I was going to place this WBA title belt on John Tate's grave. My partner on this project, Elizabeth, and I, we made the trip to West Memphis, Arkansas, to the graveyard where John Tate's body is buried.
How are you feeling?
I am feeling closure, I suppose. This was my longest project to date. I told myself at the end of this project that I did my best, which is something I never said to myself before. So, and I just want to, show respect to the man that so many people have forgotten. I think it's very important to, this man did something incredible. More so than winning the title, he desegregated an entire, sports venue that held thousands of people in a country that really needed it at a time that they needed it. And just want to, pay my respects.
I feel like it's done.
Yeah.
It's a sense of closure.
Absolutely. No, when I saw the footage the first time and there was nothing at his grave and every place around him had flowers, and I knew I needed to do something to show my appreciation. So ever since I saw that footage, I've been wanting to make a trip down here to do this, and to see flowers on it today, did make me happy. And just placing the belt there, it's
special.
It is. It's very special. Going back to the documentary, I believe the closing line was, he's only one of 82 men in history to hold this title. And we are lucky enough here in Knoxville, Tennessee, of all places, to have a man that won the World Heavyweight Championship here. It was a 4.5-month process from inception to completion to air date. And I've been filming for almost 15 years, doing videography for 15 years. And never once have I told myself that I've done my best on any project. And trust me, there have been thousands of projects. But once I watched the Big John Tate documentary through the first time, when everything was finalized, I told myself I did my best. And I wanted to show my appreciation to Big John Tate for allowing me to do my best. And that gave me closure on the entire process to allow me to pay my respects to the man that brought out the best in me.